Hello and welcome to Mwelekeo TV, where we bridge research with everyday's conversation and ask tough questions that determine Kenya's future. I am your host, Fridah Mong'are, and today we are unpacking an issue that might sound a bit technical at first, but it is one that affects your pockets, your choices, and your opportunities every single day. Kenya's fiscal policies. Now, fiscal policy is simply how the government raises money, either through taxes and borrowing, and how it spends that money. It explains why unga prices keep going up, why bus fares rise, why airtime has new charges, and why sometimes your local clinic either has medicine or doesn't. Think of it like running a household, where taxes are the salaries coming in, borrowing is the bank loan, and spending is food, rent, and school fees. When the salary isn't enough, you borrow. But over time, debt repayments eat so much of your income that there's little left for the basics. That's exactly the challenge Kenya is facing today. Too much of our taxes are going to service debt, leaving less and less for development. And the issue about fiscal policies is not just about numbers and documents. It's about people. And who are these people? The mama mboga in Gikomba struggling as transport costs push up her prices. The boda rider in Kisumu paying more for fuel. And the graduate in Nairobi who is taxed on almost every purchase but still waiting for a job opportunity. You and everyone you know. The frustrations have even spilled into the streets, with protests over the finance bill showing how deeply Kenyans feel about taxation and fairness. At the heart of it all is an important question. When government asks us to pay more, will our lives improve, or are we just carrying the burden of poor management and paying more for it? Mwelekeo Insights has severally researched on these very questions as part of our broader social and economic studies. Our findings show how fiscal decisions connect directly to the cost of living, public services, and even the mood of the nation. And that's why this conversation actually matters. Well, here today I'm joined by Tonny, my colleague from Mwelekeo Insights, to help us translate this seemingly complex topic into insights that everyday Kenyans can understand and use. Well, Tonny, karibu sana.
Thank you so much for having me, Fridah.
Yeah.
Now, let's talk about, you've mentioned fiscal policies.
Yeah.
And it might sound a bit complex for majority of Kenyans, but trust you me, once it's dissected, inakuwa ni very easy for majority of Kenya to understand.
Yeah.
It might sound good on paper, but trust you me, it affects our daily activities.
Yep.
Like you rightfully put it, how we relate with our transport, how we relate with our taxes as government, and also how we as Kenyans get to understand the issues around taxation. So today we'll be dissecting these issues, and we'll also try to look some of the countries that struggled with this issue of fiscal policies and how they managed to come out of it and overcame it.
Yeah, Tonny, that is really nice. And I've heard you mention fiscal policy.
Yes.
Is it really about people's daily realities? And for someone hearing this particular term for the very first time, can you break it down? What exactly is fiscal policy, and why should the ordinary mwananchi care to know about it? Now,
as I said earlier, fiscal policy might sound complex, but ukiangalia how things run in our country today, that's fiscal policy at its best. First of all, fiscal policy is how the government raises money plus how it spends. And there are two ways in which the government raises money. Number one, the government can raise money through taxation. And that's the biggest revenue collection for the government, for both national government and also the county government. And the other way that the government raises funds is through borrowing. And that's why Kenyans are always up in arm with the government. Wakisikia, serikali imeenda imekopa from the International Bank, serikali imekopa from the African Development Bank, they are always up in arm asking hizi pesa zinatumika aje. So two ways in which government gets its money, its fundings. Number one is through borrowing, and number two is also through taxation.
Yeah, I mean, when you talk about borrowing and Kenyans are complaining, we've always had the jokes online where Kenyans are complaining and saying, tuende tukajilipie deni wenyewe. I mean, kila mtu akuwa anatuma polepole to pay the debts. Yeah, of course, it's actually an issue that Kenyans talk about many times.
It's a conversation that a majority of Kenyans are always enlightened. Wako makini sana. Wakisikia kwamba serikali imekopa pesa, wanataka kujua hii pesa ni kiasi gani na hii pesa inatumika kufanya nini. Another thing is that fiscal policy directly impacts cost of living, public service. Unajua unapoenda hospitali unapata hakuna madawa. Unashangaa ilhali mimi natoa ushuru, where does this money go to? Sometimes unapata transport, bei ya transportation imekwenda juu. What really happens in the in-betweens between this? That's why we come in through to explain what the fiscal policies are according to the government. And finally, ulikuwa umesema hapo mwanzo that there is an analogy about a household. Unapata kwamba nyumbani kwako you need cash to run your daily activities. Number one, you'll need money. And money is what the government needs to run its daily activities. And the analogy of a household is that sometimes you'll need to borrow money, and sometimes you'll need income to run the activities of the house. So sometimes unapata pesa ikiwa kidogo ina affect allocation of funds in some of the basic issues in the nyumba, kwa nyumba. Sometimes you need to pay rent, you need to pay Wi-Fi, you need to pay water. But sometimes hiyo pesa ikiwa kidogo unapata kwamba it affects the spending that you'll have as a household.
Well, that makes a lot of sense, Tony. So fiscal policies are not just numbers as we may assume. They're not just numbers on a spreadsheet. I mean, it's about how money moves in and out within a government and operations.
And one thing about Kenyans is that wanakunga so cautious about how money moves in the economy. That's why unasikia kuna wakati wanasema, this time pesa isonge kwa economy. Things are high. The cost of living has gone high. It's because of the policies, fiscal policies that the government has introduced. Unapata kwamba every government takes over, there are fiscal policies that are being introduced. Like now unapata serikali ya Uhuru, there wasn't the issue of housing levy, but ukikuja sahi kwa serikali ya sasa kuna issue kama hiyo. And so the tax bracket inakwenda juu for those who are employed na wale ambao wanakatwa this housing levy.
So every time a common mwananchi is somewhere there and you hear them saying, money is not in circulation, it is actually a direct implication from fiscal policies.
Yes.
Okay. Well, I'm well aware that Mwelekeo Insights has carried out such kind of research before in this particular area. What did you find out about how Kenyans feel about taxation and debt at large?
As Mwelekeo Insight, we always try as much as we can to bring the situation on the ground to the public. So tulienda ground, tukafanya research on what people think about the fiscal policy in the country. And trust you, the results were overwhelming because a majority of Kenyans feel that they are being overtaxed. Wengi wanahisi kwamba serikali inawatoza ushuru kwa kiasi kikubwa as compared to other East African countries and other global countries. Kenyans on the ground, a bigger percentage, more than 51%, felt that taxation in the country is too high, and this affects their daily lives. Another thing is that many Kenyans don't trust government to use taxes well. Unapata kwamba as a taxpayer, you always want to feel that the government is spending your taxes in ways that you can feel and can see. Because for taxation is all about taking money from the people. And so when people are taxed, unataka kuona kwamba hizi ushuru ambazo tunatoa zinatumika aje. And so Kenyans, during the research, they felt that the government is not using their taxes in ways that they're supposed to. And so they raised concerns about the government overspending and how they are using their taxes. Yes.
Yeah, that's why Kenyans ask for accountability. I mean, when you've been given a certain portion of money, you need to come and account.
You need to account
and
for
transparent accounting then again.
The last thing is that fiscal decisions strongly influence public mood and confidence in leadership. Unakumbuka palikuwa na maandamano ya Gen Z na walikuwa nataka the finance bill itupiliwe mbali. The mood of the country was a bit shaky because people felt they're introducing the finance bill, and yet the government is not tasemaje hawajibiki in terms of the amount of money they are getting and the development that the country and the people that pay tax wanna experience on the ground. Yes.
So fiscal policy is actually a central issue. It is a central issue, and it determines a lot of things that govern or rather operate within a.
It determines almost everything from transport to the cost of living, public sector, the private sector pia. So the fiscal policies of a country will always play a critical role in ensuring the running of the nation. Yes.
Well, let's bring this closer home to anyone that has just joined. Let's now hit the nail on the head. How do these policies show up in the daily lives of common mwananchi?
Number one, the fiscal policy will always affect the VAT of goods. You understand, wakati serikali inasema kwamba wanachukua ushuru, kuna vitu ambavyo they will be affected in terms of VAT. First, a shopping basket will be more expensive, especially for a common mwananchi who thinks that the government as much as the government is taxing them, unastahili kuona kwamba things are running. But unapata the fiscal policy will always affect them in that the prices of essential commodities will always rise because there's heavy taxation. And that's why the research that we conducted said that a majority of Kenyans felt that the government is overtaxing them. And once the people feel that they are being overtaxed, then the prices of essential commodities in the market will always go high. Yes.
Well, I've heard you mention about debt before, but even as we were discussing, I've heard you use the word debt. Many Kenyans hear about the word debt trap, and they wonder and do not connect to the daily lives, or rather the reality on the ground. How does government borrowing actually affect us in this space?
Before even we go to the debt trap, you've asked about how this will always impact the people on the ground. Number 2 is on the transport sector. Wakati unapata kwamba even the fuel levy ikienda juu kidogo hivi, unaona matatu owners association wanasema kwamba the prices of transportation will go high. That it really affects the people both from mama mboga, watu ambao kwenye ground wanashangaa ni kwa nini hata if mafuta rise even with 3 shillings unapata kwamba wanasema tunaongeza nini nauli, and it affects everybody including the mama mboga kwa soko, including mtu wa mjengo, because they need to move. So if these things will always go high, unapata kwamba it affects everybody. Yes.
Yeah, actually, because the most minute of things you can think of, there's a time the prices of buying a packet of salt went high, and people are like, salt? What do you mean salt prices have to go high? What has been affected?
Sababu utasikia kuna watu wanasema unajua mimi sijaona advert ya chumvi. But in real sense unapata kwamba if these things, the fiscal policies, if they're introduced to Kenyans, it affects everything and all round it. Yes.
Well, even as you're saying this, I mean, the debt trap now. Can you let's talk about debt trap for a common wananchi to understand what is debt trap and how does it actually affect us?
At first, as we mentioned earlier, as a country and as a government, they need money, and one of the ways that the government collects money is through borrowing. And once you borrow, unajua ni deni. Kiomba kitu, unajua ni deni. So that's where the trap is always. And one thing is that half of Kenyans' tax revenue goes to debt repayment. It's an issue that has been mentioned earlier, and the majority of the successive governments that have been there before, the issue of debt repayment has always been an issue, because almost half of the revenue that is collected, either through borrowing or taxation, will always go into debt repayment. And that's a debt that is affecting our country up to date. Another thing, less money left for schools, hospitals, and jobs. You find that when these debts are incurred, then there's always a shortage of money that will be used in schools, in hospitals, and that's why questions are always being raised. Unaenda hospitali unapata hakuna madawa. What happens is because sometimes the government is overstretched by this debt.
So when you say you've said the word schools, I mean schools, is it actually a direct effect from the case we've had recently when they were saying they were going to like cut on the budget allotted to schools? Actually is a direct effect from our fiscal policy.
Yeah, it's a direct impact from our fiscal policies. Sababu utapata kwamba serikali inasema, that's what we're talking about debt. Unasema kuna watu ambao labda walikuwa washapata hii loan ya masomo, but in real sense they haven't repaid it. So unapata there's always a shortage of of funds that will be used to pay for those who are also seeking this. And that's unapata majority of I was watching a news bulletin a few days ago, and napata kwamba people are complaining that serikali has not released funds. And also primary schools and secondary schools are also contemplating wafunge mapema because unapata kwamba there's no money that comes from the government, and yet the government wants them to remain in school.
Sure. And other countries maybe we are looking at that actually are suffering the consequences of such improper fiscal policies allotted and anything else around there.
In the continent we have 2 countries, for example, Ghana and Zambia. The debt crisis was an issue. Sababu unapata kuna nchi fulani, I think it's Zambia, they were forced to give their beaches, yani zile za ocean, because they were not able to pay their debt in time. And so the lenders wakasema, because it was a signed agreement, then we have to
give out our beach.
Until for a period of years. And that's why there was also an issue in Kenya, because walikuwa nasema masuala kama ya SGR na pia masuala ya the hii highway ina rana expressway.
Yeah.
Sababu alikuwa anasema labda there's a way that this debt mnakopa pesa kujenga mabarabara, mnakopa pesa kujenga the SGR, but at the end of it all they don't have the returns. So what happens? It remains as a debt, and this debt have to be paid. Yes.
Well, from everything you are saying, I realize one word keeps coming up, and that word is trust. I mean, trust in the most simplest term. Why do Kenyans feel disconnected, I mean, from the fiscal reforms, and why don't they trust the government of the time?
Number one, there's an issue of corruption. Wengi wa Kenya wanahisi kwamba ufisadi imekolea. Imekithiri sana kwenye sector tofauti. Hata sasa ukiangalia there's the issue of SHA. Watu wanasema kuna hospitali ambazo haziko. They have been allocated millions of money. And so the people feel like tuna pay tax, and why is there corruption? You know, so Kenyans feel that there's this perception of corruption and wastage of resources by government. Unapata kwamba serikali, Kenyans feel that serikali wana waste resources sana. For instance, unapata kana kwamba like the government right now is trying as much as it can to renovate some of State House. Unapata? Unapata the governments that were still in existence walikuwa wanaitumia tu sawa. But the current administration wamekuja wanasema that we need billions. Because I was watching close to 670 million. Now it turns even into billions to renovate State House. So there's an element.
Well, it actually may be even true because I mean, it could be that indeed the money that is being requested for to renovate or even projects that are being implemented by the government could be true and real, but it now narrows down to trust. You know, when someone does not trust you, when the Kenyans do not trust you, anything that you'd want to implement upon them, then I mean they just have to question. It could be that yes, SHA is a good project, or rather a good program, but the very reason that we do not trust you, we just have to dismiss you. We are like, we do not want that because we know, and time and again you've proven that you are not worthy of the trust that Kenyans have given you.
You know, development and taxes is a give and get. If the government requires taxes from us, then we need to see that our taxes are working. And that's where there's always an issue with Kenyans. That's why hata unapata wanaandamana, wanasema kwamba kama serikali hatuoni, you've been there for like years, 3 years down the line. But barabara hazijengwi, hospitali bado zinakosa madawa. Ulisema kwamba utaleta vitu fulani, and yet these things are not tangible on the ground.
A lot of unfulfilled promises also.
Another thing is about citizens don't see direct benefit after paying more taxes. When I expect that the government introduced more taxes, so what I'm expecting is I need to see change.
Maendeleo kwa wingi.
Because you campaigned on a manifesto that development is coming. I'm the alternative government. And so if Kenyans don't see that, trust you me, it raises a lot of questions.
Wataipinga to the very end. Well, much as we complain about trust, I understand that there are so many countries out there that actually their programs are working, their projects are working, and trust is actually rooted in those particular countries. Are there lessons that we can learn from this?
There are lessons we can learn from them, but there are countries like Rwanda. I was watching a documentary about Rwanda. Now, in years to come, Rwanda might even surpass Kenya as one of the largest economies in the continent.
I saw Rwanda being ranked among the governance there is actually top.
Because what happens there, they're being taxed. They're being taxed like Kenyans.
Like any other country.
But unapata kwamba this taxation wanaona. If you go to Rwanda, it's among the cleanest countries in Africa. And their policies they're not just good on paper, they are working. For us, we have policies that are good on paper. But ikikuja kwa masuala ya to implement them,
implementation, very disconnected.
But for countries like Rwanda, unapata people feel, and that's when you go there, people are really proud of their country because when they see if it's lighting on their roads. Because for fiscal policy, it's not about the big projects. It's about the simple things that people can see.
Can think of.
That the country, like yesterday I was watching our country, the governor was saying that there are people that illegal connections in town. There are installations that are being illegally run. Now who are supplied with electricity from Kenya Power illegally. These are things that you cannot find in countries like Rwanda because they are better shaped policies, not only on paper, but their implementation is quite high. Yes. Another country, South Korea, decades ago, there was heavy taxation in South Korea, but unapata with this taxation, heavy taxation, unapata there were job opportunities. And if people are saying if there's heavy taxation, let there be opportunities. Si ati watu wanatoza ushuru, but inaingia kwa mfuko ya wachache. Yeah, so if there's taxation, we can learn from countries like Rwanda, South Korea, where taxation was too high, but people felt the situation, people felt employment was increasing, and also lessons learned from there.
So is it to say that a section of Kenyans do not have a problem with being taxed, but now the question is, where are the taxes going to? The trust now, we have not built a solid trust between the government and the common mwananchi, so they have to like question, I mean, where are our taxes going to? We do not have a problem giving, but we need to see the progress and development.
Yeah, from the research we conducted a few months ago, people, kuna watu asilimia kubwa walisema sisi hatuna issue na ushuru, sababu that's one of the ways that the government collects its revenue. Lakini hata kama mnatutoza ushuru, kindly let us see. Acha tuone. Acha tuone that there are changes. Isiwe tu kama serikali iliyopita ndio serikali ambayo iko kwa sasa. The things that we are fighting against the previous regime is what we see. That's the issue they are complaining. Wanasema si hatuna issue if it tax us, ituko sawa, lakini make sure as you tax us, let us see this development happening on the ground.
Well, even as they do not have a problem with being taxed, there's also an issue with fairness. Let's go back to fairness. From your perspective as a researcher, are Kenyans' fiscal policies fair? And who is carrying the heaviest burden in this particular case?
Fairness, talking about, that's what the president is trying to bring on board. Sababu ukiangalia hata kwa masuala ya taxation, NHIF, the former NHIF, alikuwa anasema there's a group of people ambao they were exempted from paying NHIF. Yes, alikuwa anasema like members of parliament. And that's why alikuwa anasema, recently I was listening to him speak. Na anasema he contributes close to 40,000 shillings as the president.
He himself.
Which goes to SHA. Na kitambo, it wasn't happening. For the leaders, MPs, members of parliament, governors, they weren't contributing anything.
I mean, these people are exempted from being from taxation?
Yes, they were exempted from paying tax. And that's an issue ambayo ilikuwa raised, na akasema it was a campaign agenda for him. Na akasema that the fairness should be equally distributed
it should cut across all Kenyans.
Kama mama mboga anatoa 500,
then so should the MP or other.
Yes, alikuwa anasema it should go in accordance with your earning. The higher the earning, the higher the taxation.
Proportional.
The lower the earning, then they lower the taxation.
Yeah.
And so low and middle income earners carry the bulk through indirect taxes, as we were saying. Wale ambao kwenye kiwango cha chini, unapata kwa wao wanatoza ushuru, au wanatoza ushuru, lakini wale huko juu,
when it actually should be the opposite of it.
It should be the opposite of it. Another thing is that wealthy and corporations are taxed in property and wealth sector. It's also an issue. So unapata kuna companies, because they can, that's why wanasema we need to try and kuziba hizi mwanya kwenye taxation and also revenue collection. So unapata kuna makampuni makubwa they file nil returns and yet they make millions and billions of money. So if these loopholes can be dealt with, then trust me, government will collect so much revenue. The tax burden for the common mwananchi will go down. Yes,
that is actually an issue the president has been addressing lately. So we can only hope that fairness is arrived at.
We're just hoping that the government will ensure that fairness is inafanyika kwa kila mtu. Sababu hakuna haja mtu ambaye anapata kiwango cha chini 30,000 salary, 40,000 salary, but tunapata the tax bracket. Akienda nyumbani anaenda na karibu around 23,000. Mtu ambaye ana earn 500,000 plus, unapata the tax bracket yake inakuwa ni kidogo sana. So it raises a lot of questions and concerns.
That is where we get to say punda amechoka.
Punda amechoka. Anasema tajiri atazidi kuwa tajiri.
Na maskini lalamika zaidi.
Yes.
I mean, so how do we fix this, and what can Kenyans do differently, maybe without overburdening the very same people?
Number one, as the president, he should expand the tax base fairly. Property, wealth, luxury goods. Unajua, let me surprise you. Unajua kuna magari fulani ambao they are so luxurious, lakini unapata tax, the importation tax yake iko chini as compared to other vehicles. So these are some of the loopholes that the president or the government, they need to look into it, expand the tax base fairly. Si ati watu wanyonge tu ndio wanakuwa tax. Make sure that this tax bracket is expanded ili kila mtu. That's why serikali inasema kwamba kulipa ushuru ni kujitegemea. So they need to expand it so that everybody at least can pay tax and also the government can collect revenue. Another thing is improve efficiency in KRA collection. KRA is tasked with collecting the revenue through tax. That's why. Lakini unapata kuna wengi people don't file tax.
They do not.
Unapata wengi wana file nil.
They do not.
Mtu akona ajira.
Returns.
Mtu akona ajira, lakini unapata kwamba ana file nil. And all the government needs to do is to look into, just come up with systems that cannot be intruded. Sababu unapata kuna watu, corruption pia huko kwenye KRA iko juu sana. Sababu hutaki kulipa tax, yule mtu ambaye anakuja kucollect tax unapata anakuambiaje, wewe niachie zangu za chai. Mwachie zake za chai, kienda kwa system ana erase, anasema wewe you don't have,
that is really crazy,
una issue. So inakuwa ni very issue. Another thing is cut wages and corruption. Free up resources. Corruption is a major concern, especially for a majority of young people in the country.
Yes, it is.
Because wanasema hata kwa ofisi za serikali ukienda unataka kusaidiwa kazi, inakuwa ni an issue. So if the government can cut on corruption and try to ziba hizi mwanya kwenye these very, very small issues, trust me, the government will collect so much tax. Yes.
So freeing up resources looks like you'd go to a public institution or a public service institution, and then you're asked to like pay for something that should be offered freely. Hapo sasa ndio people are wasting resources, and now we now have to pay. So they should be free actually.
Unajua unapatanga hata sometimes unaenda mtu unataka birth certificate. Mtu anakuwa it takes you like 2 months, a month or so. Lakini kuna mtu anakuambia wewe nipatie kitu. Alafu nakuharakishia hapo, unaongea na mtu pale ndani within 1 week. So unasema ukijua mtu inakuwa ni issue. But if the government can, it's an issue, but
it is an issue.
I'm hoping that one day itakuja irekebishwe.
Sure.
Another thing is to stimulate job creation, so more citizens contribute naturally. Isikuwe ni kwamba mnafinya watu, but in real sense kwenye ground hakuna ajira. Sababu every year watu watu wana graduate. People are graduating.
But we are releasing people into the job market.
But in the job market pia hakuna kazi. And these same people are expected to have a KRA pin.
Yes.
So unatoka shule uko na KRA pin yako, and it makes sense uko nje hakuna kazi. So what happens, it becomes serikali kiangalia kwenye system inaona watu wengi wakana the KRA pin, but pesa reflect ile kitu ambacho
whatever the system is showing is not what actually is.
So the government should create job opportunities so that they can have a wider bracket of taxation. Yes.
Yeah, that's really insightful, Tony. I'm learning a lot from this. And maybe if you had if you are given like say 5 minutes with the president to advise him on this particular issue, fiscal policy, what would you say to him maybe?
If given an opportunity to say to the president, cha kwanza nikwambie ukweli mimi kwanza. Number 1, balance revenue needs with fairness. Balance revenue needs with fairness. Pasikuwe ni pakuwe na wala watu wanafeel wamekwazika. Let him balance. Let there be an equilibrium. Mahali ambapo mtu anahisi kwamba if I'm paying this tax, let it be fair. Pasikuwe kuna group ya watu ambao their tax bracket is too low, but the earnings is too high. Parce kuna watu ambao wana earn kidogo, but the tax bracket is too high. If that is done, trust you me, the president will have an easy time. Another thing is to invest in sectors that reduce cost of living directly. Sectors that if the government invests in, it will reduce the cost of living.
Sure.
But the reason why the cost of living is too high is because sometimes we are overspending. Like we rightfully put it earlier on, almost half of our budget, half of our revenue goes into salary payment. So imagine kama mnapata like 7 trillion, then 3.5 trillion inaenda kwa kufacilitate mambo ya salaries na nini. And also there are issues of ghost workers. Sababu unapata kuna ghost workers wa kwenye different, it's an issue. So if the government can stimulate projects that can generate a revenue, trust you me, they will have an easy time. Another thing is regain public trust. Citizens must see results and their sacrifices. Public trust is everything. If the government wants to make strides, let them just begin by winning the people's trust. Sababu at the moment people feel, from the research we conducted, watu wanahisi kana kwamba they are being overtaxed, one. And number 2, the tax that is being remitted to the government, hawaoni ikifanya kazi. So if the government can work on that, regain people trust, fanyia watu kazi, let people see it, trust you me, people will file taxes without thinking twice. Yes.
Well, finally, Tony, for an ordinary Kenyan listening right now, or rather someone who has just joined into the show, what's the one key takeaway from this particular discussion that you'd want them to draw from fairness, debt trap, trust issues? What is that one key takeaway you'd want them to draw from this particular discussion?
Number 1, take away home is that every Kenyan has a voice. Kila mtu akona sauti.
Kabisa.
Iwapo unahisi kana kwamba pesa zako hazitumiki vizuri, raise a voice. Wewe ongea. Make sure it's heard. And to demand accountability. Accountability is what a majority of Kenyans feel is lacking in our national government. So if accountability can be tackled, trust you me, this will be a very smooth flow for the government. Another thing is fiscal policy is not abstract. It shapes our daily life. Who is dhani ati kwamba hii ni ya matajiri peke yake? It affects every Kenyan. Wapo mafuta itapanda kwa shilingi 3, yule mama mboga ambaye anataka kuendea mboga sokoni itakuwa ni ngumu sababu transport itapanda. Number 2, bei ya bidhaa kwenye soko it will go high. So it's not an abstract thing. It affects our daily lives. So these fiscal policies will always affect our daily lives. And finally, every shilling paid in tax is a stake in Kenya's future. That's why wanasema kulipa ushuru ni kujitegemea, lakini hatuwezi kujitegemea kama hiyo ushuru ambao tunatoa hatuoni mazao yake. So every Kenyan should know that paying your taxes is good, but always cry out loud in case unaona kwamba hizi pesa ambazo unatoa hazitumiki kwa njia ambayo inastahili.
So let's talk about accountability. Accountability actually begins with all of us. It's like a universal agenda. It shouldn't be like we are waiting for the government to be accountable. We should be accountable right from it should be a habit amongst us, so that it actually reflects to even the government to also be accountable to us. I've seen organizations like the Institute of Social Accountability trying to engage people and enlighten them on the same. So accountability is actually something that should trickle down right from the government to the most local person seated somewhere.
That's why kuna mtu alisema kwamba ya Kaisari mpe Kaisari. Kaisari unajua ni the government. So if you're supposed to file taxes, just file.
You do your duty.
Do your duty. But when it comes to accountability, let also the government play its part. Sababu if the trust is broken, trust you me, hata wale watu ambao wanatoa ushuru, they'll begin to question. Na nakumbuka hata during the maandamano during the time ya Uhuru, Raila alikuwa anambia watu hapana, don't file taxes until tunaona pesa yetu inafanya kazi. Things like those ones will always arise wakati watu wana feel kwamba tax zao hazitumiki vizuri.
Well, Tonny, that's a powerful reminder and discussion and takeaways to our viewers. Thank you so much for breaking this particular issue down in a way that we can all understand. And to our listeners, thank you so much for tuning in at Mwelekeo TV. Remember, this conversation doesn't end here. You stay engaged, stay informed, and keep asking the tough questions that actually matter on our social media handles, and we'll help you amplify them. Thank you so much.